some of my insights with regards to exploitation of research, and in our preparatory talk, Anna asked me to share some maybe success stories or personal experiences that I made during my academic career. And that's what I'm going to do in the following couple of minutes. So I collected 3 examples that I found useful on a personal level first, then on a network level, and then a third one with regards to the wider community we as academics are involved in. So basically, maybe just a bit more of contextual information. As I said already, I'm assistant professor right now, and I joined, so to say, I continued my academic career after finishing my PhD in 2012 as a postdoctoral researcher. And here I would like to refer already to my first insight, to my first story that I would like to share, and I called it "Finding Your Place in Academia." And what is meant by that? It was in 2013 when I joined a workshop of the European Academy of Management, which was organized at the university in Liechtenstein, actually, and it was entitled "Finding Your Place in Academia." And I found it super insightful and interesting, the workshop itself, but also it was very powerful and impactful for me in my further personal development as an academic and as a researcher. And what was the main goal of this workshop, "Finding Your Place in Academia"? Basically, we were working on 2 different perspectives on an academic career. And the first perspective was, what are the different professional roles that you might take over in your future academic career? And I found this type of question very useful because it made us thinking about the different roles, because you might, first of all, particularly as a young researcher, I think like, yeah, okay, I'm a researcher, and that's of course my main activity, and this is one of my roles. But besides to continue with your research, basically you might also become a teacher. A future role could be to become a mentor, for instance, for your students. You will be a project manager, most probably, because doing research is also to be successful with writing project proposals, with carrying out research projects together with national or international partners. So we might be also a team leader in the future. Moreover, depending on your specific employment or your specific position, most likely you will also become a lecturer. But you will not only be a lecturer, you will be also an administrator. And this means that you're also will carry out activities with regards to universities, staff and administrative tasks. And there are a lot around. And you will be a colleague, of course, and you will be an employee. And there might be other different roles that you take over in your career. And I found that super insightful because, as I just said, it made me think about the different roles. And then at the same time, we were also confronted with the questions, what are our goals? What are our skills, competencies? What are our priorities and wishes? Our past experiences? What are our future priorities? And to bring those 2 different perspectives together. So just as a very concrete example, maybe you have been extremely or hopefully extremely successful with your research during your PhD studies, but so far you haven't had the opportunity to become a lecturer. So you would need to ask yourself, okay, what additional skills, for instance, do I need to deliver high quality teaching? Or how can I combine the different roles? So how can I organize my schedule? How about my time management to bring the different tasks and activities together, and to combine them most of all in a very successful way, because most of the different activities and tasks that I mentioned will become relevant throughout the future career. On a more personal level, you could ask yourself, what do you like or dislike? I mean, all of us have different personalities and characters. What would you like to improve? So what do you need to know? And in the previous presentation, we heard already as one of the suggestions, namely to be hardworking, but also to acknowledge what you don't know, and what would you like to improve. So we could continue with this kind of question, of course. But in a nutshell, bringing those two different perspectives together and then thinking about the vision and the goal and what would be your next steps in your professional academic career could be one step to successfully continue. So this was a very fruitful experience for myself. Secondly, my second insight, of course, talk about your research. Whenever you would like to exploit your research, you need to share it. And this type of audience might not be the very first one you are talking to as a very young researcher, but however, start talking about your research and use as many possibilities as possible. So that might cost you quite an effort. So because this, sometimes these are rather new situations, challenging situations sometimes, but share your ideas, share your research, and also explicitly ask for feedback. So this was one of my experiences as well. You need to really directly approach colleagues, other attendees at conferences, and explicitly ask for feedback. Then you might also use more informal conversations, coffee breaks, talks, workshops like this Cresting workshop this week, to get in contact with others and again to ask for input and feedback on your research. And then maybe you might also have the chance like this one, namely to meet very inspiring experts, like in this case, I hope that you can see him. It's Edward Freeman, and we met him at the conference in Berlin. The picture was taken by Rupert, so this is the reason why he's not on the photo. But this was a very, very inspiring situation for me personally. And this could also happen if you're like outgoing and use such opportunities. So this was then already more on a network level. And then, as I said, a third insight, it's related more to building networks and communities. And this is the third
insight. 5 minutes.
Yeah, fine. This is the third insight, actually, I wanted to share, like talking about your research, attending conferences, I mentioned that already, also offers the opportunity to widen your network, to build up trustful relationships. And whenever you have the possibility to also contribute to a network and to building up a community, I would say that you need to use these opportunities. And another experience from my academic career, here you can see just a screenshot of the New Business Models Conference. And the story was like that a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to join a team of experts working in the field of new and sustainable business models. And in 2017, that led to the result that I, together with the team here in Graz, we had the opportunity and the chance to organize the second international conference on new business models. And I continued working on that. And as a result, maybe you already can see it here on the left corner. So there will be a conference in 2021, and we continue with that series. And I'm now the board co-chair. I became the board co-chair together with Florian Lüdecke-Freund. So basically, we are here building up a wider network and community of researchers and practitioners who deal with the question of how sustainable and new business models could look like. And this gives me the opportunity and the chance also to give something back to the community or to one community I'm involved in. And this gives you also then the opportunity to share your ideas and to offer a platform which others, younger researchers, more senior researchers can use to get in contact with each other. And again, to share their ideas, to share their research, and to hopefully further stimulate research that is helpful for practice as well. So just to sum it up, 3 insights that I shared, and maybe one of these stories might offer you also an inspiration and an insight what you could do or how some examples of exploiting research could look like. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Romana, for this very interesting input. It fits very well to the 5 points which were mentioned by Henri before. What I have to add to your situation is that you are very well on the way to become associate professor here in Graz. So for those familiar with the Austrian and German university system, we have to do a habilitation, and the process of finalizing this habilitation is well on the way. So maybe in a few months or so, Romana will then be our next associate professor. And this is a very important career step, and this is only possible if you are really able to combine these 3 things mentioned by Romana. So of course it's rigor in research, but there are more things you have to do in the academic world to make your next steps. Are there any questions for Romana?
Thanks, Enrica.
Thank you very much, and thanks for a nice introduction. My story basically started about 20 years ago when I was a high school student in Brazil, and I heard how humans were really having a negative impact on the environment. I was reading about desertification, and I decided at that point that I really wanted to do something different, and I wanted to contribute to a brighter future, so to say. So I decided to, in my university degree, to do environmental engineering, and I joined the University of São Paulo at the time with lots of passion and lots of desire to make a positive difference in the world. It was exciting in the first few years, but then I realized that the main focus of the course was actually on cleaning up all the pollution and all the problems that we had in the world, instead of being more proactive and trying to avoid those problems to happen at a first instance. So I was wondering whether it wouldn't be possible to be more proactive in making the things right from the beginning than trying to clean the mess afterwards. So it was a little bit of a career breakdown. I said, oh my God, did I make the right choice or not coming to environmental engineering? But then one of the days I was walking around the campus, and then I saw advertisement for a life cycle engineering conference. I had no idea about what it was about, but I said, well, let's go and see what they are talking. And it was really my aha moment during this conference. They were talking about being proactive and thinking about the entire product life cycle from the very early stages of design, where we could actually have a huge influence on enhancing the environmental performance of products and avoiding environmental impacts before they actually happen. That really changed my career from that moment on, and I was focusing more and more into how can we look into the product development process, and how can we integrate environmental issues, take decisions, so to ensure that products will be more sustainable overall. And still during my bachelor, I did lots of research on eco-design methods and tools. At the moment, I found more than 100 different ones. And then I really wondered why companies weren't developing more sustainable products if the tools were already there. And that's when I decided to continue with the research career and to do a PhD on industrial engineering. My main goal there was to try to understand how I could support companies to implement eco-design and to be more proactive when taking sustainability into account. It was an interesting journey to start the PhD because I started to see all of the scientific elements of that and how important it was to have rigor at the same time as developing something that would be applicable to companies so that, again, I could make a difference. What happened there is that during the PhD, the initial phases, they were really theoretical. So it was really diving to literature, trying to understand what existed out there and trying to put some structure into it. That's when the first versions of the eco-design maturity model, as we call it at the moment, were created. But I had the need to spread that out and to hear as many people as possible to see whether my little office outcomes were actually leading to something that would be meaningful. I had the chance to go to Germany, and I was a PhD guest in Berlin. What I basically did was to send emails to the 40 most recognized authors in the topic. And my email was something like, "Hi, I'm Daniela. I'm developing this maturity model. I'd love to go and visit you to show what I've done and to get your feedback." 15 out of those 40 researchers and people from industry replied my email. And during the time I was in Berlin, I had the chance to travel around Europe to talk about the maturity model. It was so powerful to get perspectives from different people and to understand how I could make it better. But I knew that I needed to work with industry as well. And I actually thought that that would be one of the biggest challenges, to try out what I've developed in industry to show that these could actually lead to more sustainable products overall. One day I was sitting at my office here at TU Berlin. It was just here, I had a beautiful view to the lake. But I received an email, and that was from a guy from Embraer. This is the third biggest airplane manufacturer in the world. The guys from Bombardier might say they are the third one, but we are in competitions there all the time. But this email was basically from a guy that was responsible for implementing eco-design at Embraer. And then he found one of my academic papers online by Googling eco-design implementation in industry. And then he contacted me asking whether I could help them to move forward in eco-design implementation. And it was, of course, a great opportunity for me to do that. And actually, my first action research during my PhD was together with Embraer. I learned a lot. I developed the model together with them, even more from what I've done before. And it was a very interesting experience to be in the real world, to see that all the challenges that I was reading about were really happening in industry, and also to see that the maturity model that I developed could have a potential in helping those companies. I knew that only one industrial experience wouldn't be enough for the PhD, and I was very lucky also to be contacted by another Brazilian company, Natura, which is a cosmetic manufacturer that is well known for their sustainability actions. They are expanding a lot. They just bought the Body Shop, as you might know, and they're coming to Europe and becoming stronger and stronger here. Another interesting, completely different industry, but what was insightful there is that the maturity model could also support them. They were in a different space in their journey. They were developing very different products, but the model was also suitable for them. And then I had the chance to, through these experts that I contacted at the time that I was in Berlin, to come to Denmark, to DTU, still doing my PhD as a guest PhD student. And then I had the chance to apply the model one more time during the PhD at a Danish company. It's the biggest pump manufacturer in the world. And we came up with similar conclusions about the applicability of the maturity model. It was enough from a PhD point of view. So I went back to Brazil, I finished my PhD, and then I was a doctor. But what now? I didn't really know if I wanted to continue in academia or if I wanted to go to industry, but I got an invitation that I couldn't say no to, and it was to continue the work at Embraer and work for them as a product development engineer in implementing the roadmap that we developed together during my PhD. And I was there, it was about 6 months in, when I received a call from Denmark back again saying, well, you know what? Grundfos really wanted to have you back, also to support them with eco-design implementation and the roadmap. Would you consider coming back to do your postdoc at DTU, half of your time, and then the other half support Grundfos in doing what they have to do? It was a difficult decision because I could have a brilliant career at Embraer if I decided to stay there, but I knew that the model would somehow die if I continue there, and I really believed on the power of the model and on the potential for industry. So, as you might guess, I came to Denmark, and I was here as a postdoc researcher for 2 years, helping Grundfos to implement eco-design, but also work with a number of other companies that you might recognize from the picture. And by the end...
Sorry, 5 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
By the end of the postdoc, I realized that I couldn't continue doing research on the maturity model because I had published all the papers that I could publish on the topic, and there wasn't that big scientific contribution or newness anymore. But at the same time, there was a huge potential from industry. I was being contacted by several other companies wanting to try out the maturity model to accelerate their journey towards eco-design implementation. That's when we decided to spin out Essensus, which is a start from DTU, and we actually got funding from the university to get started, which was really useful in the early stages. From the very beginning, we established Essensus as a way to disseminate the knowledge that we develop at the university, but also to reinvest profits back into research and back into university so that we can have this win-win situation over time. Since we established Essensus, we worked with many different companies, and here you can see some examples: Steelcase, Adidas, Michelin, and Johnson & Johnson, all major multinational companies dealing with eco-design. We expanded the focus of the question from only eco-design to environmental, social, and economic considerations, so a full sustainability perspective. And we've been using that more and more into a circular economy perspective as well. But basically, from that one question, how to support companies in making the transition, I came up with many, many, many other questions that I keep answering in research, and I keep helping industry in making the transition. And this is just the beginning of the journey. So I'm very much looking forward to see what comes next and what surprises the future will bring to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very nice presentation and the very inspiring pictures. Perfect. There were some questions in the chat. I think, Anna, you had a question for Daniela.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me properly?
I didn't understand the question, sorry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, Daniela. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation, and congratulations on the completion of your project, also related to circular economy, Circuit North. Yeah, I had a question because you said that during the development of your eco-design maturity model, you started contacting some companies. So I wanted to ask, how mature was your maturity model when you started contacting them? Was it 100% completed, or was it still open for adaptation? Or at what you decide to try, basically?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I had to have something ready to be able to apply and provide value to companies before I start contacting them. So my approach there was to, first of all, contact experts from industry and from academia just to get their feedback. And that's the time that I was in Germany as a PhD guest. And then my plan after that was to start contacting companies. But what happened was actually the other way around, because companies started reading my papers and they started contacting me, wanting to have the help. And at the moment they did it, then I was ready to help them. So for Embraer, it was really a co-development. The model wasn't 100% ready yet, but we basically developed it as we went through the work together. And it at the same time provided value to them. So I was not only collecting data, but I was actually helping them to plan their way forward. And for the other two companies during the PhD, they were more case studies where I was testing. So the idea there was to have a more developed model from the beginning, and then test it, see what could be improved, and then test it again. And that was the approach that I took. But I think it needs to be iterative. You cannot wait up until the last minute of your PhD to try it out, because there are some nice learnings that you can have from early application in industry. But at the same time, I wouldn't recommend going to industry at day one, where you are still not really sure about what your outcome is going to be, because then I guess it can bring more confusion than help.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much, Anna and Daniela. Is there still an urgent question? I mean, we are already...
One question from my side, if I may.
Yeah? A short question and a fast answer.
Daniela, very impressive pitch. Very impressive. First point. And then second one, have you been funded as a company, or how many people are working in your company already? Voilà, so short question from my side.
Yeah, so in the beginning, we got funding from the university. It was a startup funding, and they call it a POC funding. So it's a proof of concept funding. It was very little, but it really helped us to get going. And then from then onwards, we are basically running on customer base. And we basically have two main groups. We have a group in Essensus.
But not directly producing cars, yeah. Only bringing some seats and so on, yeah, special things. ABL is a special engineering company here placed in Graz. KTM is one of the biggest motorbike players worldwide, and together with the University Leoben and University Munich. And the target was to find a recycling solution for lithium batteries. Lithium batteries were coming 2007, 2008 on the market, starting with mobile phones, yeah. Before the good old Nokia mobile phones were having a nickel battery inside, not a lithium battery, yeah. And so there was no recycling solution existing. And the result was, at the end, we were creating a recycling solution, and it is very complicated because it's dangerous as such a lithium battery. Fire, very much electricity inside, critical elements like cobalt and nickel creating cancer, yeah, inside, but the worth is very high. And after we are having the recycling solution, the next step was buying the biggest battery recycler. That was the company called Redux. And we were implementing that research thinking in development. So we were building a plant for 10,000 tons per year at the end in Bremerhaven, that is running since 2 years there. Where's the next one? And from our side, from a company, what is the problem with R&D? The first one is to find the right university, because just think of lithium batteries. Yeah, there was no, in Europe, there were no university existing which are taking a look at battery recycling. Yeah. So how can you find a university who wants to be an expert in future there? Yeah. Then another problem is that the subvention. It's easy to get subvention for a big international project with many partners. Yeah, I was by such a project, by an European Union project, with a Scottish, Spain, France, Germany. I think Romania was also including. Absolutely horrible. Yeah, there is no really result for a company. Yeah, because it's so complicated and you spending very much time in administration. Also, the problem is to get subvention, because you get in subvention when the politicals are saying that is a problem. Yeah, but the political are saying that is quite complicated. And another problem is that the university are often far away from the real business. So we are thinking it's important to build an international network. Yeah, to all the time having good contact to local university, because that's quite easier to work together. And a local company with a local university, it's quite complicated to work together. For instance, with a Canadian university, because time and it's completely different.
Gerald, 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah. And another interesting thing is that in reality, not the professor is doing the work. Yeah. So on the other side, as a company, that must be clear that you must develop the young persons. Yeah, the PhD and so on. Yeah, that is interesting, because on one side to develop it, and on the other side, maybe in some years to take those persons in your company. Networking to politicals is necessary, because to get a subvention, and think 5 years in the future. Think, for instance, which product, which problem could come. Yeah, that is very important. The next slide, please. And one more, going to 8. Sorry. The next one, please. Yeah. Here are some examples from our side what we are missing at the moment. We are missing basic research. Yeah. Basic research is, for instance, by the collection part. At the moment, we are having a separate collection for batteries, but in reality, less than 50% of the batteries are going to that way. We are losing 50%. But we're always talking about finding recycling solutions for the batteries, and maybe 2% better than the old one. Yeah, but in reality, we are losing so much because of a worse collection thing. Yeah, and so there are also research, influence distance to waste bin, quantity, quality of waste, influence emptying interval. Yeah. Why is the separate collection in a big city like in Vienna so bad? Yeah, or influence of direct cost to the quality of residual waste. We are making an unofficial, or it's an official R&D project with a sensor technology by a bin, and giving a response to the household which quality does, for instance, the residual waste in reality is having? How much disturbing substances are in your residual waste? And after that, we are reducing the quantity of approximately 50% of the residual waste, because the people are thinking, oh, some is checking my bin, and so I must do a better separate collection. Yeah. Also missing some macroeconomics things like influence of landfill ban. Yeah. Which economic parameters are necessary for starting separate collection, for instance? When I'm starting separate collection system, for instance, in Africa or so, somewhere else, or in Romania, yeah, it costs money, yeah. And so there are many things what we are missing, and from my side, it's very important that young people are interested in this field, yeah, and working together with the companies, yeah, and thinking in the future, yeah, 3 years, 5 years in the future. That was short overview from R&D from a waste industry company.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Gerald. That was a great set of insights from...
Is supposed to be still this year, end of this year, November, December. But we're really just at the beginning there.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So now our next speaker, last but not least, Mr. Simron Singh. Thomas, can we share his presentation? Hello. Is my mic working?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I don't see the presentation yet on the screen.
Simon, please start. We are starting the presentation here.
Yeah, but I already sent the file.
Yeah, we are starting it here, and
okay.
Please start with your presentation, with the talk.
Sure.
Great.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I mean, it is indeed morning for me, since I am in Austria and not in Canada, so this is helpful. Rupert already introduced me a little bit, that I'm an industrial ecologist. I study the circular economy potentials on small islands, and these are perfect laboratories, as you can imagine, with very clear delineations. But there's also a sense of urgency for small islands, because they're always on the front lines of climate change, and the resource shortages are pretty real. So when I call myself as an industrial ecologist, just to be more accurate, would be better to say I'm a social and political industrial ecologist as well. So I have a social science perspective on this field, and it's because materials energy do not flow on their own. They are deliberately organized by society. And also because social systems are very complex. Next slide, please. Yeah, social systems are very complex, they're unpredictable, and they are very messy. Next. So solution to one problem can cause another problem. So we want to do good, we want to help, we want to change something, but you can end up in some very, you can say, unintended consequences. Next slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the end. So I brought in my key take-home, let's say, messages, because if I run out of time, I can stop anywhere. So my main point I want to make in this presentation is exploiting your research is a process, and it's not an end product. And I want to say that as 5 points. First thing is to ask the right questions, meaning, for example, this is an example of a transport. So we often ask, how can we make transport more efficient? But I would rather encourage you to ask, why do people travel? And it's good to be efficient when you travel, but I think if you want to achieve absolute reductions, in resource use and achieve sustainability, we also have to understand why people travel, and can we minimize people moving from one place to the other. So this would be a different way of asking. Other question is we often ask in development is how can we eradicate poverty? And I would rather ask the question, why does poverty exist? So, the moment you ask a different question, you have a different answer and you have a different solution. So that's my first message. The second one is to be a systems thinker. It means don't seek simple solutions or find explanations to complex problems. Use the 5 whys of Peter Singh. You might probably know that, and if you don't, just Google Peter Singh, 5 whys. It's if you ask yourself why 5 times, I think you get to the root of the issue. Often we talk about Corona and say, well, it was Bill Gates or it was the 5G, and these are simple explanations to complex problems, and I would encourage you to stay away from those. Third point is to know your audience. Are they ready for your research? Is your research is there going to be an uptake? Is there a need for your research at all? And how would you define success? So I think it is very important that you have your definition of success. What do you think, what do you want to achieve? And how would you measure that impact that you want to have? The fourth point would be to collaborate. So when you're tackling a very complex problem like sustainability, it requires multi and transdisciplinary partnerships. When I say transdisciplinary, I mean engaging, kind of civil society, citizens and other stakeholders in your research. Because, so I think what is becoming more and more important is to co-create knowledge together with your stakeholders, with people who you want to, let's say, for whom you want to do this research. So collaboration is extremely important. And last but not least is to be humble. Is working with vulnerable communities is a privilege and not a right. And many of us will be working with vulnerable communities. And even if you work for the planet, for the ecosystem, this is also, it's also vulnerable at this point. So next slide, please. So I want to now take you to how I came to these points. And I want to give you a little bit of a personal story here and bring you to the year 2004 in December. And some of you may have heard of the world's deadly tsunami. And it's been not only the deadly tsunami, but it's also the top 10 disasters, like the worst disasters in history. It's the top 10. And so what you see in this map are, as the Nicobar Islands, and this was very, very close to the epicenter. So you can't see the waves because the left part of the image, it was animated, but at this point not. So these Nicobar Islands were extremely, extremely devastated in a matter of minutes. Next slide, please. So in the Nicobar Islands, the tsunami took with it a third of the population, so it killed about 10,000 people on the islands. It took away villages, livestock, and livelihoods, but it also took away 5 years of my research. This is where I was working for many, many years. Next slide, please. So in 2006, Science published an article about my engagement with the Nicobar Islands, and they called it After the Tsunami, a Scientist's Dilemma, and that's what the title of my talk is. So it says that I was taking a fateful decision to leave all objectivity and science behind, but to come forward and help the people. But actually the real situation was, and that I have circled, it says I actually had no choice but to jump in and leave all my scientific, let's say, presumptions behind, but to jump in. And it was a real crisis, a real situation, and there was no option but to go and help. Next slide, please. So I'm writing here is for years the Nicobaris had participated in my scientific agenda, helping me to learn about their islands. Now they had questions and wanted my participation. So this is a very different situation where you are asked to participate in a real life crisis. Next slide. So this is a quote from my field diary. It says, "My illusion to provide meaningful help as an expert soon crumbled. Soon after the tsunami, the Nicobaris were confronted with a multitude of choices they had to make in a very short time. There were questions that were thrust at me, and I stood facing my own moment of truth. I froze when decisions had to be taken and realized how little we academics are trained to take real-life decisions. Next slide, please. So my inability to help people in crisis, I was questioning my scientific training, and I asked myself these two very important questions, and that helped me shape my future research. First question was, what is the role of science? And second is, how can science help people in crisis? And I'm not only talking about these big disasters, but also we're talking about the sustainability crisis that we're going through at this point. Next slide. Soon after that experience, I launched a full island industrial ecology program. And so my program is called the Metabolism of Islands. And my program engages with island communities and provides policy relevant insights. We ask questions that address the urgency of islands. We look at how islands can build resilience from impacts of climate change. And most important is that we collaborate with island governments and very strong institutions that are on the islands. So if you don't have strong collaborative partners, if you don't have governments on board, I do not engage with those, with those territories, because it doesn't make sense at all. Next slide, please. So I'll give you one example from Grenada, that is in the Caribbean. Next slide. So here is a map of Grenada. And what you see in this result is that there is a spatial distribution of Grenada's material stocks. It means when I say material stocks, I mean the built environment. And what you can see, these all red parts this is the coastal squeeze. So most of the infrastructure on Grenada is basically concentrated in the southwest part of the island. And this is very unfortunate, because this is exactly where, this is on the path of hurricanes. And when you have these risk layer maps, you understand why Grenada is highly vulnerable. And so if you go to the next slide, please. We were able to show in our study how much of infrastructure, but also the services these infrastructure provides to society, or even the economic sectors, are exposed to risk at just 1 meter sea level rise scenario. So you can see tourism is the highest, it's the second highest, it's at very high risk. And then all the industrial sectors, around there. And then comes residential and institutional. So through this type of result, they were able to influence, better spatial planning on the island, and where certain, let's say, stocks and these services should be located on the island. We can move to the next slide. So this is an example of waste flows, of Grenada. So this was the first comprehensive solid waste study for Grenada. And as you can see, this is a linear one-way system. So what's happening is these islands import 80 to 90% of all their needs from outside, and then all of it just remains on the island. So basically, small islands don't have the facility or the resources to re-export these materials. Basically, they can't re-export waste. So they stay on the island. So we did studies for several islands looking also at electronic waste. And this is just one image to show the solid waste system on Grenada. As you can see, it's a linear one-way system. And year after year, you have a lot of resources that are actually just ending up in these landfills. To the next slide, please. So our findings from this case have been used in Grenada's Sustainable Development Plan for 2020 and 2035. And so this is the plan that's online, and you will see our work being cited and referred to when they're talking about system resilience and when they're re-strategizing waste management for a circular island economy. So this is just one example, and I'm happy to take questions and talk about further examples in different islands as well. But I can leave it at that, because I don't want to take more than 10 minutes than I was offered. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this inspiring presentation and for adjusting so well to the time frames. Okay, I think Anna Walker has a question. Anna, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, hello. Hi, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I was wondering, you were talking about that after the tsunami, the people suddenly turned to you and wanted you to take decisions, but then is it just because you were somebody from outside who they perceived that you had more knowledge? Because probably I would think that the scientists are there to provide information, but the decisions should ultimately be taken by the communities who are going to stay in their land. What is your opinion on that?
That is absolutely correct. And well, it was perhaps as an outsider, but I have been working with them for several years before. So I had developed a reputation of being the expert on the island. That was one reason. The second reason was I had become very close to the people, and I was a go-between them. And I should have mentioned that the people on the Nicobars are indigenous people, and it's a very closed system, so they don't really go out. So it's a very protected area. And they were not used to making decisions so strong or change happening so fast. So when there were all these help coming in and these all these decisions about the future of the islands, they were totally at a loss. For them, it was totally out of the world view to even understand what this all meant for the future. So it was a matter of trust. And since I had stayed with them for several years, and it was a matter of trust that they looked up to me for providing them with some honest opinions. And that was the main reason. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. We also have a question from Daniela. Daniela, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, of course. My question is, how can we avoid potential rebound effects or side effects when we are proposing new solutions?
Yeah, I mean, that's not easy to answer, but from my field, the kind of work I do, I strongly, so I say that there are kind of two things. One is that we are responsible as researchers for the quality. So we are responsible for two things. One is the quality of the information. Firstly, that we are able to provide that. But at the end, it is not us about taking decisions. But what we could do is to provide not only the quality of information, but the quality of the decision-making process. So at the end, it is really about the communities. It's about the stakeholders. It is their future. And I think a second role for us is really about providing a quality of process where we have a very transparent and a very open process where decisions can be made. So basically, offering a science-informed decision environment, and so at the end, it is really about the communities. So talking about trade-offs, the pros and cons, say, okay, if you do this, and so there is no one. It's not always about this is the right and this is wrong. It's always about trade-offs, and these trade-offs are actually something that must be shared with the communities that we are working with, and the communities should have a full say on those trade-offs, because if the Nicobaris, for example, they want to modernize and they want to go in a certain direction, they must know what this means for the future. And so at the end, it is their decision, but we can ensure the quality of information, but also the quality of the decision-making process.